Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Startup Jungle podcast. I'm your host, Sweeney, and today I'm here with a wonderful guy. His name is Justin Roff-Marsh. Now, he's located in LA, but he's originally from Australia. And he has a book coming out soon called The Machine, based around his process of sales process engineering. Now, that's quite a mouthful. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about sales process engineering?
Well, what it involves is simply bringing an engineer's approach to the design of the sales function, which sounds like the kind of thing that nobody would object to. But if you think about it carefully, and you compare, a typical sales function with the kind of function that would normally be formally designed, by a proper engineer, like a project environment or a production environment, then it's easy to see that sales environments are fundamentally different from those other types of environments, and consequently, there's, in my opinion and experience, a huge potential for improving the performance of sales by engineering the sales function to look like a project or production function in a mature organization.
And it's one of those things that has been around with us for so long that I'm sure, there's a lot of things that have just been built in just because and have kind of stuck around and hasn't quite moved with the technology, I can imagine.
Well, I think that the traditional design of sales has probably been fit for purpose for most of the last 100 years or so, mainly because we, meaning industrialists, have been busy working on other parts of the organization and have been getting better returns from working on other parts of the organization than we would from sales. So if you look at the history of industry, for most of the short history of industry, it's actually true that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. And the recent success of companies like Amazon and maybe before them Dell, go to prove that it's actually true. You don't even need a better product. You can build a better distribution system, and the world will beat a path to your door. But I think that increasingly what's happening is organizations are finding themselves with an abundance of production capacity, and even with an abundance of distribution capacity, or to maybe more accurately, with no issues distributing rapidly to customers. And of course, both of the and as a consequence, the constraint, if you like, is shifting from production and distribution to sales, and now it probably makes sense more so than ever before to pay some attention to sales. And if we do pay attention to sales, what we end up discovering is that a sales function today looks like manufacturing would have looked about 100+ years ago. Now, this is relevant for technology companies, of course, because for technology companies, the incremental cost of producing one more item is typically zero. If you sell packaged software, that's true, but it's also true if you're a SaaS company. I asked our sysadmin the other day, what's the cost? We were considering running up instances of an open source CRM, vTiger, that we're big fans of, to give away to organizations, and I was thinking about it as a promotion, and I was curious what it would cost to run up an instance, and he did the maths for me, and I think it was something like, 1 cent per month was the incremental cost of running up one more instance of vTiger for a client, for I don't know what it was, 10 or 15 meg of data on AWS. So in many modern organizations, the incremental cost or the cost of incremental production is dropping to zero, and the distribution is ceasing to be an issue because we're distributing digitally, and that too is causing us to need to pay more attention to sales.
And do you find with the sales process engineering, is it more newer companies that are kind of going with this approach, or is
No,
it older companies trying to transition?
no. Newer companies copy what old companies did 10 years ago, where older companies are desperately trying to find a new way of engineering sales. So the sad irony is that now that's not true across the board. I mean, there are some pioneering things being done with inside sales by some larger technology companies, HubSpot's a good example. But I've got to say, a lot of startups will simply accept conventional wisdom on face value because they don't have time to think deeply about sales and what might be wrong with it. Whereas, a lot of our clients are very mature manufacturing organizations who have manufacturing and distribution down pat. They're experts in that. And they've recognized, it's become abundantly clear to them over the last few years that their constraint has shifted to sales, and as a consequence, they're actually a lot more interested and probably more advanced than a lot of startups are when it comes to the design of the sales function.
So where do you feel like startups are kind of getting it wrong then, would you say?
Well, I think startups, and there's probably pressure from investors too that pushes them in the wrong direction, fall for the idea that a sales function equals a salesperson. Therefore, if you need sales, you need a salesperson. If you need more sales, you need 2 salespeople. And if you need a shit ton more sales, then you need like 20 or 30 salespeople. And that's about as sophisticated as the reckoning that I commonly see in and around the sales function gets. There's no consideration whatsoever for the mechanism that actually operates in order to originate an opportunity and in order to convert an opportunity into a sale. There's no consideration given to what it is that a salesperson actually does. The sales function is regarded as a black box that happens to take the form of a salesperson. So if we want more sales, we get more salespeople. And investors often push that by having their PAT ratios, their ratio of salespeople to expected dollar of revenue. So we see startups being pushed by investors into adding a sales team with no real in-depth analysis, and it would be like saying, well, if we want to develop software at a faster rate, we add more programmers.
Yeah.
Where the term programmer meant anyone who's vaguely technical.
Gotcha.
That's exactly what we see happening in sales. Now, so what we see happening in sales is probably akin to what would happen is if you got a marketing person and told them to build a software development environment. They would employ developers. They would fail to make a distinction between architecture and design and coding and QA and so on, and they'd probably fail to understand the requirement for architecture in what they were building. They would start at the top and work down, or start at the bottom and work up, and build. And certainly you can get some results. You might get some initial results like that. You can employ a coder and get them to build something and get some fairly fast progress. But you're going to reach a point of diminishing returns very, very quickly. And that's exactly what we see happening with sales environments. And once you reach that point of diminishing returns, you can't solve the growth problem by chucking more developers at it.
Yeah.
You need a formal approach to the design of the environment and to the management of the workflow.
Do you feel that a big part of that is because a lot of the startup community is more tech focused, and a lot of them have tech backgrounds compared to marketing and business backgrounds and sales backgrounds?
Well, it's a problem, yeah. That's the reason, but it's also a great opportunity, because the reality is that technical people, engineers, are far better disposed to understand the direction that I'm advocating they need to go in, and they're in a far better position to move in that direction. Because what we're talking about is engineering the sales process as opposed to evolving it from standard practice.
So let's circle back. So sales process engineering. I know you have the 4 principles. Can you describe those 4 principles for us? Kind of just give. I hear the term sales process engineering. I don't really know what that means.
Why don't let me suggest another attack? Because I'm concerned this is all a little bit abstract, and if I go into if I start talking about principles, it's going to be even more abstract. I'm concerned that people are going to be listening and saying, "Well, the guy seems to have a point, but where the hell is this going?" Would it be helpful if I described what a typical sales function might look like if it was re-engineered along these principles, and then dig into the principles?
Surely, definitely.
So, I think it's helpful to contrast standard practice with with SPE, or at least what SPE would result in. And standard practice is, if you want sales, employ a bunch of salespeople. And what tends to happen is, if you imagine that you scale that approach out, initially you employ a bunch of salespeople, and then you need more sales, so you employ some more salespeople, and then you say, well, gosh, we got customers all over the place. We should probably put salespeople close to customers. So then we open some regional offices and we put salespeople in them. And then we discover we have a management problem, so we need management, of course, sales management, but we need sales managers in the regional office, then we need a VP of sales in the head office. And we end up in a situation where we have this network of salespeople. And presumably, as a consequence of that, a whole bunch of sales would be happening, but we can loop back to that in a minute. In our world, we don't assume, or we don't accept, that salespeople create sales. We believe that salespeople play a critical role in the generation of sales, but the part that they play in the machine as a whole ideally is pretty small. And the bit that salespeople, to my mind, should be responsible for is the performance of what I call critical selling conversations. And our position is that that's the only thing that they should be responsible for. In other words, salespeople should be responsible for performing critical selling conversations, and that can happen on the telephone, or it can happen face-to-face in the field. But what's important is critical selling conversations. So what I'm suggesting is that salespeople do not create sales. The real cause and effect relationship is between critical selling conversations and sales. Now, if you engineer a sales function with that in mind, what you're going to realize straight away is, well, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that has to be done in order to allow salespeople to be in a position where they're doing nothing other than performing these critical selling conversations. So we need to build a whole bunch of machinery around them. And what we're going to discover is that the sales function ends up being a bit like the Air Force. When you think of the Air Force, you think of pilots. But the reality is there's probably 300 people working in the Air Force, not including subcontractors, for every one pilot. And exactly the same thing applies to sales. So in order to have a salesperson in a position where they do nothing other than critical selling conversations, what we need to have is a promotions function behind them that generates sales opportunities and serves them up. If it's an inside salesperson, we need to serve them up such that that person can have 30 or 40 meaningful conversations a day and do nothing else. That means they don't generate proposals, they don't dispatch documents, they don't do anything else. They just have conversations on the telephone, or perhaps conversations via email, whatever. If we're talking about a field salesperson, then our preference is to partner that field salesperson up with an executive assistant such that they do nothing other than face-to-face appointments, and all of the office-based stuff associated with opportunity management is done back in head office. Now, once we get this far, we start to realize that a field-based salesperson, to the extent that you actually need one, can cover an enormous amount of territory. So what most of our clients realize is that if they operate in, let's say, North America, you don't need 10 salespeople in each region to cover North America. If you have an inside sales team, most of the selling conversations can occur by telephone. And the smaller percentage that do genuinely benefit from face-to-face representation can probably be handled by just 1 or 2 or maybe 3 salespeople. If those salespeople are doing field salespeople, if those field salespeople are doing nothing other than performing face-to-face conversations, because they can cover an enormous amount of ground. I mean, I'm the only salesperson at Ballistix, and the territory that I'm responsible for selling into is Australia, the US, Australia, North America, and the UK. Now, the reality is that the team throttles me back because I could realistically sell more than they have the capacity to deliver. So when you add all that up, if you compare the organization you're going to end up with the typical one that I described a moment ago, you're going to end up with a similar organization with no regional offices whatsoever, with maybe 2 field-based salespeople covering the whole of North America, each of whom is going to be partnered up with an executive assistant back in head office, and then you're going to have quite a sizable inside sales team, maybe 10 or 15 people, and behind that inside sales team, you're going to have a promotions function that generates sales opportunities for the inside sales team. And then in the background there, you're going to have quite a large customer service team that looks after processing inbound orders, handling customer issues, generating quotes, etc., etc. So that's an idea of what the final machine would look like, and a contrast. So, and the reality is that many of our larger clients, and this won't apply so much to startups, but it's good for illustrative purposes, most of our larger clients would end up closing down regional offices, reducing significantly the size of their field-based team, reducing the size of their sales management team, increasing significantly the size of an inside team, or building an inside sales team from scratch, and building a bigger customer service team. And as a consequence, when you look at the volume of selling activity on both a per capita and a per dollar of sales-related expense, and even on an absolute basis, the volume of activity, in other words, the volume of meaningful selling conversations, tends to explode as a consequence, with no increase in costs, oftentimes a decrease in costs. So
And
that's the end state.
it sounds like too, by kind of getting rid of some of these regional offices and bringing everything to more of a centralized location, you're going to do a lot better with the culture and kind of having more of an organization.
Yeah, it means that you don't end up with the balkanization of the firm, which then requires managers to do nothing other than try and travel around and keep the whole thing, united, to manage the culture, as it were. The other thing is, by getting rid of all those regional offices, you actually offer better customer service, because the reality is customer service goes up not when customers are close to salespeople, but when customers are close to operations. And by having the sales function predominantly in head office, what we end up doing is causing customers to become closer to operations, because there are fewer hops in terms of number of people they have to talk to between them and operations.
And that does sound kind of more uniform with, kind of the startup approach, which is to have everything a bit more connected, from the engineers creating the product to the people actually selling it, and not having the separation.
Oh, there's congruence from every angle that you look at it. And I think the problem with startups is that where sales is concerned, they start with the wrong mental image. They start with an image of the first organization, as I described, as the inevitable end state. I believe that if startups started with the image of the alternate organization that I described, completely flat, very few field people, a big inside team, and all opportunities generated by a marketing or a promotions function. If that was their picture of the end state for their sales function, they would design it quite differently from the get-go.
So when you say opportunities, I'm assuming you mean leads. So
Yeah.
what's the division kind of look like? You have the executive assistant, you have someone generating the sales opportunity or leads, you have the critical sales conversations, and then you kind of have the back-end customer service, customer satisfaction, or what's that divide kind of look like?
So let me start with customer service. Closest to operations would be customer service, and customer service are managing the interface between operations and customers. Now, the management of that interface would involve handling issues, of course. With tech companies, there would certainly be customer service would include help desk, or help desk and customer service would fulfill similar functions, even though they may be different departments. But also, customer service should be processing repeat transactions. So if somebody's purchasing for a second or third time, or purchasing something very similar to what they've purchased previously, salespeople should not be involved in that at all. It should go directly to customer service. So customer service is an inbound function. They handle issues, they process transactions, and in most cases they generate all quotes and proposals. Then moving out from customer service, we have promotions and inside sales. And it helps to think of those two together. So inside sales is a telephone-based sales team. You could think of HubSpot here as a great example. You have a team of people with headsets on who spend 100% of their time engaged in critical selling conversations, either on the telephone, via email, instant messaging, web conference, whatever the case is. But 100% of their time is spent selling. Now, to facilitate that, promotions is serving up sales opportunities to them, which are kind of similar conceptually to leads. You can prompt me for the distinction between them later. So promotions is serving up opportunities for them, and their job is to close those opportunities as rapidly as possible, either by winning them or losing them. And of course, the way you get to either a win or a loss is to talk to people on the phone, critical selling conversations. So that's promotions and inside sales working together, and that in most cases is the bulk of the sales machine. And then you have field sales, and field sales would consist in my world of one or two dedicated field salespeople partnered with executive assistants. Now, in the case of a startup, what we would do is we would have the founder typically fill the field sales role to the extent that it's even necessary. In other words, if somebody has to go out in the field and sell, we would have the founder do it because it's extremely expensive and extremely risky for a startup to employ a salesperson until they have designed the sales function and got proof of concept. It's extremely risky to employ a salesperson to operate within a sales function that doesn't currently exist, because you can guess who's going to be engineering the sales function if you do that.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be an engineer.
Yeah. So well, first I want to kind of clarify with you critical sales conversations. What do you determine those to be? Can you give me a few examples? Because I understand the concept, but I just kind of want some examples just in case.
Yeah. So it's a little bit contextual. If you were a field-based salesperson, you would define a critical selling conversation as a conversation that has to be performed in the field. In other words, a dude, where's my order call, as I call them, is not a critical selling conversation. So if a customer said to you, yes, we're going to proceed, we'll send you a PO, calling that person saying, where's the PO, is not a critical selling conversation. It's critical that it occurs, but it's not really a critical selling conversation in the meaningful sense of the word. So if you're a field-based salesperson, the critical selling conversation are those conversations that genuinely need to occur in the field. So that would be conversations around the design of solutions, the negotiation of terms for bigger commercial agreements, and so on and so on. If you're an inside person, then critical selling conversations would be any time that you have a conversation with a customer, as opposed to leaving a message on a voicemail or having a chat of some kind that doesn't actually transact in any meaningful information.
Okay.
So the idea is that once we've defined critical selling conversation appropriately for the context, then we want to make sure that if we have a person with the salesperson title, whether they be inside or outside, that we push them to full utilization as rapidly as possible.
I saw something on the site I saw that I wanted to bring attention to. Was I'm pretty sure it was 4 appointments a day, 5 days a week?
Yeah.
So what is that? What's that?
So if you have a field salesperson, that field salesperson should be performing at least 4 appointments a day, 5 days a week. Else you shouldn't have them. And if you can't generate enough appointments for a field salesperson to perform 4 appointments a day, 5 days a week, you shouldn't have a field salesperson, and your founder should have appointments scheduled for him or her until the volume of field-based appointments increases to the point where you can consistently generate 4 or 5 appointments a day, 5 days a week.
Gotcha. And so I also found it interesting. You seem to be kind of anti CRM. You don't really seem to like it. You do like VTiger. I saw you mention.
No, I'm not anti CRM.
Okay.
The point that I make is in a typical sales function, the CRM provides no benefit whatsoever. It's not designed for salespeople at all, as many of the tech companies producing some of these new age, CRMs are arguing. The CRM isn't designed for salespeople. It's designed for management and operations. It really isn't a useful tool for salespeople. So in a traditional sales environment, where a salesperson owns the sales function, where they're responsible for originating and prosecuting opportunities from start to finish, they don't need a CRM. A traditional daytimer calendar is more than sufficient for their purposes, and in fact you could argue it's actually better for them because you don't have to wait while it boots. It's more available. They can put it on the steering wheel of their car and write in it immediately after an appointment. But I'm not arguing there isn't value in CRM. The thing is, when you engineer a sales environment along the lines that we're advocating, CRM becomes critical, So none of our clients could do what, or people who follow, not just clients, anyone who implements SPE, none of them could do what they do without CRM. It just would not be possible. So in part, the direction that we're advocating here has been made possible by that technology. But the technology only makes sense if you want to apply division of labor and build and convert sales into a formal process. If you're not planning on doing that, then leave salespeople alone and let them use a day planner or a Franklin Mint calendar or whatever the case is, because it's actually fit for purpose.
Have you ever thought about coming out with your own kind of, not necessarily CRM, but just software in general around the sales
Well, we
process?
sort of have. So, most of the organizations we work with have committed to Salesforce, for better or worse. For better because it's an awesome CRM. For worse because it's awesomely expensive.
Yeah.
So in most cases we work with Microsoft CRM. The exception to that would be organizations that are sort of wedded to the Microsoft stack, in which case Microsoft CRM is a logical choice for them. And both of them are good CRMs. Salesforce has become more of a development platform, but I guess in the Microsoft environment, you've got the Microsoft stack, which is a development platform all by itself. For organizations we work with who don't have a CRM or who have like a low-level CRM that they need to upgrade to something more enterprise class. So if they've got Maximizer or vTiger or Act or something like that. Sorry, Maximizer or Goldmine, I meant to say, or Act or something like that. We will migrate them to vTiger, which is an open source CRM. In terms of why don't we build our own, the reality is we've been working with vTiger for the last probably 5 years, and over that time we have customized it significantly. We haven't branched it. We've remained committed to merging our add-ins and hacks with the new versions as they come online. But for clients of ours that don't have a CRM, we do provide them with vTiger.
Gotcha. Now, something else that I thought that was pretty interesting is, you had a background where you originally got into insurance sales, and at one point you were managing a team of around 100 people, I believe.
Yeah.
And one of the big problems you deal with, of course, is turnover.
Can I show you something funny?
Of course.
The founder, well, the major shareholder in that company was a chap called Gary, who's been a good friend of mine for many, many years. I don't see him so much anymore because he lives in Brisbane. I live in LA. But 2 weeks ago, I was back in Brisbane, and we met for coffee, and we were laughing about the individual investments days. And he said to me, Justin, do you know that there was a year where we employed more people than BHP Billiton? So BHP Billiton is a multi-billion-dollar Australian. It's originally an Australian mining company. I think it's listed on the London Stock Exchange now. But at the time, it was probably Australia's biggest company. And in that year, he told me, we had employed more people than BHP Billiton. And I think we'd probably recruited close to 600 people in that year. There's a sad ending to this story, though. There's a sting in the tail, and the sting in the tail is that, we had recruited 600 and probably lost, 500 of them. So it was, really it wasn't quite a boiler room environment, but it was dangerously close to a boiler room environment. And we would recruit, hundreds of salespeople a year. By hundreds, I mean between 400 and 600 salespeople a year to maintain a team of about 100.
That sounds like you said it's an Australian company or it's a British company?
It was an Australian company.
It's for the launch of your book. I know that should be the title of some of your articles. When the year we employed more employees and salespeople than BH or whatever.
Well,
It's
nothing to be proud of. But
it's the flip. What I learned from that.
The story served me well, because oftentimes I'm with organizations, and maybe there'll be a sales manager or somebody who wants to be defensive of the standard approach to sales. Autonomous salespeople, paying them commission, what I call the go get 'em tiger method. And if I get frustrated with someone's defense of standard practice, what I'll often do is point out to them that if they were consistent in their beliefs, their sales function would look nothing like it currently looks. In other words, I point out to them that that the sales function over which they're currently presiding is not consistent with the approach that they're advocating. And then I'll describe to them the sales environment that we had back then in the old days. In the boiler room environment, where salespeople did earn some salespeople did earn tens of thousands of dollars a month, and and describe to them exactly what it was like to build and manage a team of salespeople like that. And I think I probably aged 10 or 20 years in 2 or 3 years of running that team. And I think if you could go and look at what it's like to manage a boiler room environment like that, it would tarnish your perception of the standard sales model. And most organizations only tolerate the standard sales model because they haven't bothered to try and push it to its limit. If you push it to its limit, it becomes pretty ugly pretty quickly. Whereas our approach to the design of the sales function, we have a number of organizations, some of whom we work with, some of whom just read the book and follow along for themselves, who really are pushing the limits, who do have salespeople operating consistently at high levels of utilization, and who are growing the size of their teams. And the reality is, the bigger those sales organizations get, the easier they are to manage, because the systems get grooved in, the management procedures get grooved in, the culture, the desirable behaviors become baked into the culture, and we see increasing returns as opposed to diminishing returns per the boiler room environment.
And I know, so a big part of that you mentioned is moving from like a commission structure to kind of a team member structure, or is that the sense still holds true in the SPE?
It's conceptually, it's maybe not a big piece, but it's an inevitable piece, and if you don't do it, it ends up causing big problems. So here's the real alternative. The alternative is between commissions and management. So if you know someone who's a sales manager and you want to annoy them for no good reason, or maybe for good reason, you can point out to them that they are a manager in name only. Because if you're a manager and you manage a bunch of autonomous agents, which is really what salespeople are, then by definition you're not a manager. Either you are a manager or those individuals are not autonomous. In the sense that I'm using the word autonomy, you can't have degrees of autonomy. Either someone is autonomy or they are autonomous, or they're not. They either march to the beat of their own drum, or they march to the beat of someone else's. There's no middle ground. It's one or the other. So if you interview most salespeople, they will be quite clear on the fact that they march to the beat of their own drum. If that's the case, they don't have a manager. They might have some geezer with a business card with sales manager written on it, but it doesn't alter the fact that they don't have a manager. So the real choice is not between commissions and salary. The real choice is between autonomy and between sales consisting of autonomous agents and consisting of a team. If we decide we want sales to be a team sport as opposed to an individual pursuit, then the elimination of commissions is just something that happens naturally. It has to happen, same as it happened in manufacturing environments.
And do you have trouble transitioning, the go-get-'em Tigers into, hey, team environment, this is how much you're going to earn now?
We don't have trouble transitioning the Tigers. The Tigers are pussycats at heart. We have trouble transitioning the managers. The problem is that managers have bought in to the traditional sales orthodoxy to a far greater extent than salespeople have. The thing is, if you're a salesperson and you spend a lot of time in the field operating in the type of environment that you operate in, you have probably become jaded with respect to the orthodoxy, because you can see what the weaknesses are. You live with those weaknesses every day of the week. If you're a sales manager, though, your job is to maintain the orthodoxy. So you've built your whole existence around this this set of beliefs, and we challenge every one of them. So what we find is that salespeople adapt very willingly. If we say to a salesperson, look, we've got an idea. We'd like you to spend 100% of your time face-to-face with customers. We're going to give you your own dedicated executive assistant. He or she is going to book your calendar for you, and you're not going to have to do any design or solution design or customer service or project management, because we're going to transfer that all to specialists. So you can spend 100% of your time face-to-face with customers. Salespeople do not have a problem with that. Okay, if someone has a problem with that, they're really not a salesperson.
Yeah.
So we don't have any trouble selling the tigers. It's the handlers that we have problems with, because we're trying to deconstruct their entire reality. And it's very, very difficult for them to make the transition, because they have to turn their back on everything they believed to be true or convince themselves was true up until that point, and they have to switch their management approach. They can no longer manage, in inverted commas, by hustling. In other words, nipping at the heels of salespeople. They have to manage by actually managing in a formal sense. So we give them data. And we give them a formal approach to managing their teams, but in many cases the sales managers are very, very uncomfortable with that. In many cases, sales managers would rather go out in the field and sell than stay in the office and manage their sales teams the way we want them to. So yeah, this is tough for sales managers, and I've got to say that people assume that in implementing SPE they're gonna lose a bunch of salespeople. What generally happens is they keep their salespeople and lose their managers.
Well, it sounds like you almost need a different kind. You need a different kind of manager to manage the process.
You need someone who's more analytical.
Yeah, compared to.
You need someone who has that. You need someone who has communication skills, obviously, because they've got to have enough emotional intelligence to be able to communicate effectively with salespeople. That's a given. But beyond that, what's really required is an analytical skill and the ability to manage a team of people. So you need to be a bit of a systems thinker. You need to be able to understand the big picture. You need to understand that, well, what you're dealing with is a reasonably complex machine. We've got a process that starts with offer formulation, that flows to campaign creation and campaign execution, and then flows to scheduling and selling appointments, and in amongst that we've got solution design and document generation. All of these moving parts really are activities being performed by different specialists, and this machine has to be integrated so all the parts move together. Because if any part breaks, then we lose opportunities or damage client relationships.
Now, there's I saw on the cheat sheet, the Mixergy cheat sheet, you mentioned hustling kind of versus critical selling conversations. And now, obviously, a lot of startups, kind of fall in love with the notion of hustling. So I kind of wanted to bring light to that and what you meant versus about that.
I think you can use a term hustling in two ways. If you're a brand new startup, in other words, if your business consists of you and a founder, you and a co-founder, then you're using the word hustling in a slightly different sense from the way that I'm using it. And what I mean is that your entire business is a hustle. And this is a lesson in the lean methodology, the lean startup methodology. Even the production or development side of your business is a hustle, because you're not building the perfect product. You're not boiling the ocean and building the perfect product and then going live. You've got this iterative approach even to design. So I think the central lesson of the lean startup is, from the get-go, rather than creating a 500-page business plan and then architecting a perfect product, what you should be doing is starting with a general direction and hustling like crazy. In fact, it probably should be called the agile startup rather than the lean startup, because it has a lot more in common with agile, in my opinion, than lean. But that's the sense in which the term hustle is used, and that makes a lot of sense. But when you have a mature sales environment, let's assume the business level hustling has stopped. We now have a mature product and a mature sales environment. If you break selling conversations into two categories, you discover that some of the selling conversations are necessary but not strategic, and others are critical and strategic. So let me give you an example. Let's assume that there was a good reason why it made sense for me to come out and visit with you in your office. In order to, and I have an executive assistant, Charlene. Mm-hmm. In order for that meeting to occur, there would, well, if you look at that meeting in totality, there will be a number of conversations that will occur. The obvious one will be the conversation between you and I when we eventually get face to face. But around that conversation, there's a bunch of other conversations. My assistant will probably talk to your assistant 3 or 4 times to find a slot and time that'll work, and we'll schedule it. And then, of course, it'll need to be moved. So, as happened with this conversation here. Yeah. So our assistants will talk backwards and forwards three or 4 more times. So what we end up discovering, for every critical selling conversation that occurs in the field, there are probably 5 or 6 non-critical selling conversations, and we will refer to them as the hustling versus the critical selling conversations. And what you want to do where field salespeople are concerned, and this only applies to field salespeople, is you want to make sure that field salespeople are focusing on the critical selling conversations, and they're leaving their executive assistants to look after the hustling.
Now,
the where's the PO call is also a hustle. Dude, where's the PO? That's a hustle.
Gotcha. So where do you have any examples of current startups that, to kind of bring the focus back to startups, current startups that you really like their sales process? Maybe they aren't following SPE, but they are, doing a sales process that you like.
Yeah, well, we surprisingly work with a lot of startups. I say surprisingly because we're not based in San Francisco, and even though I probably view myself as a geek, we don't actively pursue the startup community as much as we do manufacturers for reasons that I talked about previously. But I'm thinking of some examples. We have there's an organization that we work with. They're actually based in Australia, but we run their engagement. We work with them from here in the US. And in their case, we've built a virtual sales team for them. So inside salespeople who are telephone based. They sell a medical device. They sell it by trial. So we have a very simple process. We have researchers who hunt down contacts within medical centers or appropriate departments within hospitals. We send an information package and we follow up. We offer a trial. We get the trial booked. They have the device for 2 weeks, so we have a number of devices that we have to schedule between these facilities, and when one of them finishes, we move it on to the next. And then this post-trial, the sales team is following up, converting a percentage of them into sales. And that's a really nice process, and what's nice about it is the fact that it's very, very lean. They didn't want to they weren't used to managing salespeople. They didn't have a big office in Brisbane, so it just made sense. And they're selling in 3 locations: the UK, Australia, and the US. So it made sense for us to build a virtual sales team for them, and we actually manage their sales team for them. They sit in on the management discussions so that they can sort of stay in tune and develop an understanding of how to manage the team. But we have one of our consultants actually managing that team. It's work from home nurses that we've recruited predominantly in different locations. And that's a great example of a small business, taking this approach and executing it in a very, very lean way.
Are you familiar with New Relic at all, or no?
New Relic. Yeah, funny you should mention New Relic. We're actually a customer of New Relic. I'm a big fan of it, but our development team is a massive fan of New Relic. They spend half their lives in it trying to figure out how to make our applications go faster. So yeah, I am familiar with it, but I don't know anything about the organization or the design of their sales function.
Well, part of what I found interesting, because I was familiar with them because I saw a lot of their ads everywhere, and they're big on giving away a free T-shirt or a free year of TUTS programming, teaching, something along those lines, if you just sign up for an account, which was interesting because you don't normally see physical products given away as much, especially in the software space. And
that's interesting. So they're giving away a physical product to avoid giving away the virtual product, I guess.
Well, no, they give you you get like a free account, and you get a certain amount of data, and then once you reach that data, you have to upgrade your account. So you do get a free trial or so.
Yeah, actually, I think we start on a free trial.
There you go. But you also they have their data nerd shirts, which are kind of branded. It's their thing, New Relic Data Nerds that they
Cool.
push.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting because physical products, are we've seen in the digital space, a lot of physical products are doing very well now, and they don't have to directly be related to your company, but they have to
Hmm.
be related to the interests of your demographic. But to
Yeah.
recircle a little bit more, the CEO Lou, he used to work at a company that had a much larger sales team, so he realized with this company, New Relic, he focused more on trying to make a great product and kind of trying to have that freemium model and that SaaS-based model so people could get into the product, fall in love with the product, and then want to buy the product from there. So I thought that was kind of because he used to have a huge sales team and then he moved to where he's at now. And he's obviously
Cool.
doing very well with the product.
Yeah, the software is beautiful software. Very impressed with it. I'm envious of it. I wish our software could be that beautiful. So yeah, I mean, if anyone's from New Relic, hit me up. I would love to have a drink with Lou at some point.
Gotcha. Well, I'll definitely send a tweet and try to connect you guys. I doubt
Go
it'll
for it.
work, but never hurts. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else that you didn't touch on, maybe that you'd like to touch on when it comes to as far as startups and focusing on their sales process? Obviously, they should check out your book.
Um, my advice for startups would be uh, to um, to try and incorporate sales into the lean startup methodology. So you have this, and I think that's nothing really new, because Eric Ries talks about going out and showing the product and finding out a way to actually sell and deliver the product in a partially formed state. The MVP and so on. But I think what you want to do is figure out how to evolve a sales function iteratively. And my favorite way of doing that is to have the selling initially done by the founder. Now, my view is the founder, no matter how socially inept they are, can sell by virtue of the fact that they're a founder. If you want an example of that, Microsoft, the senior executives or the sales executives used to, or at least the story goes, be very keen to have Bill Gates attend sales meetings, in spite of the fact they had no idea what he would do in sales meetings. And there's a few, I believe, instances where Bill Gates behaved very, very badly in client sales meetings, told clients he thought they were idiots. But in spite of that, it was still extremely valuable. So founders can sell just because they're founders, no matter how socially inept they are. And if they are socially inept, customers oftentimes will find it an endearing quality, which they wouldn't if they were dealing with a salesperson. They'll think, gosh, he's socially inept, he must be really intelligent. So now, where I'm going with this is that because all founders can sell, you want to start off with the founder selling your product. Because if your founder can't sell your product, no one can sell your product. And if no one can sell your product, you're probably on the wrong tack. So that's probably valuable intelligence you need as part of your iterative lean startup approach to the design of your organization. So as part of the evolution of the organization, what you want to do is to figure out how, in a cost-effective manner, you can involve your founder in selling. And the way that we would approach that is to say, well, we're going to start off by getting the founder an executive assistant, which sounds like an extravagance, almost an embarrassing extravagance for a startup. But in my view, it's the best thing you can possibly do. And the reason for that is that the founder's time is extremely scarce, and therefore, how good a job you do of rationing the founder's time is going to have a big impact on the growth of the organization. Now, individuals do a terrible job of rationing their own time, so that should be a non-starter. Sending them away to do a time management course is a waste of time and money. What you want to do is get your founder an executive assistant. And then what you want to do is to get the founder's executive assistant to plan their calendar such that they spend a small percentage of their time performing critical selling conversations every single week, and the rest of their time can be allocated, according to whatever algorithm the founder and the executive assistant agree upon. But the constant needs to be that there's a fixed volume of meaningful selling conversations occurring every single week, and they can be on the telephone. There's a couple of reasons why you should do this. Number one, you get good quality market intelligence feeding back into this critical iterative process. The other reason is you trust the intelligence because you know that a founder can sell because they're the damn founder. The other reason is that when you partner your founder up with an EA, you get more value out of their operational time. It's not just the sales benefit. And the other reason is that when it comes time to build a formal sales function, you have a working prototype there. Even if your founder is only performing 5 or 6 meaningful telephone-based selling conversations a week, when you start off by adding an inside salesperson, you take that block of time that the founder is currently dedicating to business development and expand that to 100% of the new person's time, and you have them emulate exactly what the founder was doing previously on the telephone. So you actually have an established process into which a new recruit can step. You want to avoid at all cost gambling everything on a VP of sales. Those people, investors or whatever, who point to that as the way to do sales, they will point you to the success stories, but they won't point you to the failures. And I think if you do your research, you'll discover there are more failures from gambling everything on a VP of sales than there are successes.
Are you familiar with the term growth hacker marketing at all?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that whole scenario?
I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan because in our model, what you need to do is to ensure that salespeople are never prospecting. So the job of promotions needs to be to queue up sales opportunities upstream from salespeople. Now that's not something that traditional marketers are good at. Traditional marketers are good at polishing logos, and and doing a whole bunch of ephemeral stuff that is certainly necessary. But that has nothing to do with the immediate generation of sales opportunities. And if you have a sales function, you have a bunch of hungry salespeople there who have to be fed with sales opportunities. And if you stop feeding them with sales opportunities, they stop selling. So there's this requirement for promotions as opposed to marketing, which essentially involves shoveling coal into the furnace. And that's where this whole growth hacking concept becomes so valuable, because the best way to do that is to build a function that is in pretty much every sense a little growth hacking machine.
Okay.
And tech companies are good at that, because really growth hacking is essentially an engineering function.
Now,
so yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. In fact, I spent a lot of time on growthhacker.tv
Did you read the book Growth Hacker Marketing? We just had Ryan Holiday on recently. That's why I asked.
I didn't even know there was a book, Growth Hacker Marketing. Has he written another book?
He wrote Trust Me, I'm Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator.
Yes, I've read that book, and I heard his Mixergy interview. Yeah, but I haven't read Growth Hacker Marketing. I have followed along in the technology press, though, the evolution of the term and the controversy over the usage of the term, but I haven't read that book yet.
Well, I'll send a link your way. It's on the Kindle too, so it's perfect for you.
Excellent.
And it's kind of an interesting story too, because I know you're doing a book release, and Ryan Holiday has done a lot of book launches and done very well and very successful with books. And part of what he's done with Growth Hacker.
I have it in my head to talk to Ryan at some point. So Ryan, if you're listening, hit me up, because we need to launch our book soon, and I'm sure our publisher. Actually, I shouldn't say publisher. Our distributor would love us to have a PR campaign. So I wouldn't mind picking Ryan's brains on that.
I'll definitely connect you guys. I know he's big on. I think he says advice is free, implementation is what costs. But what he's doing with.
Yeah, and I've been preaching that for years. And that's so true. Our whole approach, and I'm sure it's Ryan's too, is give away. People say, well, how do we protect our intellectual capital? And I say, you don't. You give it away. The value is not in the knowledge. The value is in. Now, I don't mean your trademarks.
Yeah.
Although the reality is, you do protect your trademarks by giving them away. You can't trademark. You can't patent something and simultaneously maintain secrecy. But what I'm saying is, if you have valuable knowledge, it's probably the value is in the implementation, not in the knowledge. And I say to our clients, look, if you want to know how valuable your knowledge is, stick it in a book and see how much you can sell it for. And there you go, it's worth $20. The real value is in execution. So the trick is to give away your knowledge in order to earn the right to charge a significant premium for implementation.
There you go.
And that really, if you're selling complex products or services, that one sentence or two sentences, one sentence, should describe the philosophy behind the design of your sales function. And if you look at HubSpot, that's probably a fair description of what they do.
And that is what a lot of startups are doing now too, with a lot more content marketing and.
Yeah, but you got to be careful there. The content marketing only works if there's some sort of cerebral component to what you're selling. If you're a Uber, and what you're selling is inherently simple, and what you're essentially trying to do is to commoditize an existing inefficient marketplace, you don't want a sales process that's reliant upon content marketing, because it's counter to what you're trying to achieve. It's so sure, there might be some value in building a community and having a certain amount of zealotry out there, but that's a temporary phenomenon. You're trying to sort of commoditize an existing marketplace. But if you're trying to sell CRM or sell something that requires that people change the design of their brains a little bit in order to become believers, then you absolutely should be leading with content.
Gotcha. Well, to circle back real quick, what Ryan's doing with the growth hacking marketing is he released a smaller book on Kindle for, I think he charged around $3 for it or so. Got a lot of press, kind of proof of concept and market validation for that book, and now he's doing he's kind of beefing up the book, doubling the size, and doing a formal, book launch and book release. So he is almost following the lean methodology for the launch of his own book.
Yeah.
And kind of building up a community and a tribe and people who've already purchased the book and know about it.
Yeah.
So I thought you might find that interesting as well. So anyways, I appreciate you coming on today. What's the best way for people to reach you and find out more information about?
The best way is to go to my blog, which is salesprocessengineering.net. If people are interested in the book, you can get the first 3 chapters of the book for free if you go to 4appointmentsaday.com. So either go to 4appointmentsaday.com and request the first 3 chapters free. We'll send them to you by snail mail, and that'll redirect you back to the blog anyway, or just go to salesprocessengineering.net. And I think all but the last chapter of the book are on my blog. So if you want to read the whole damn thing, just go to salesprocessengineering.net and click on the machine tab, and you can read all but the last chapter, albeit not in its final form, but you can read at least the first draft of each of the chapters.
So how close are you to finishing the book?
I'm 1 chapter away.
So what's holding
and then
you
a
back?
shit ton of editing, no doubt.
Yeah. So what's holding you back on that 1 chapter?
Well, it's a tough chapter. The last chapter is talking about. So the second part of the book, the second half of the first half is kind of strategy, and the second half is execution. And the last chapter in the second half is talking about management. So how to actually do management. How to engineer the management component. And for us, that's probably been the bit that we've gotten to last. It's taken us a lot of years by trial and error to figure out how to build sales environments according to these principles in a whole variety of different industries. But then the management piece is the really tricky piece for reasons that I discussed earlier. So it's forcing me to do a lot of thinking about, well, organizations that we're working with that have done a great job of the management piece compared to those that haven't, thinking about situations where we're actually providing the management, and to try and to boil it all down to understand the essence of what makes it work and what makes it fail. So the reason it's taking a while to finish that last chapter is we're almost how can I say, writing it as we build it.
Gotcha. All right, and you can also be reached on Twitter at
Justin Roff-Marsh. At just Justin Roff-Marsh, JUSTINROFFMARSH.
Gotcha, great. Well, appreciate you coming on again today. I'll send you some of that, what we talked about, tweets and people, and send you some articles, and we'll definitely be in touch, man.
Good on you. Thank you. I hope this wasn't too dry.
Oh, no, it was very good. I liked it.
Excellent.
All right, have a good one.
Good on you.